Welcome to Fathers and Perinatal Loss, a webinar series that explores the unique and often overlooked experiences of fathers who have faced the profound and heart wrenching experience of losing an infant. Perinatal loss, which includes stillbirth, miscarriage, neonatal death, and other forms of pregnancy related loss, can leave fathers navigating a complex landscape of emotions, from sorrow and guilt to confusion and isolation. Their experiences are vital in the healing process for both themselves and their families. Our hope is that through these conversations, fathers, families, and professionals can gain a deeper understanding of the unique challenges fathers face and find support and solace in the stories of others who have walked a similar path.
Is that you're adding to your uh, you're adding to your family, not replacing. Having this baby is not like a can of beans where you can go to the store and replace it. You've already got that previous baby in your soul and in your memory, and you go through that. So the important thing for anybody is that this is no longer our first time. It may be our first successful and living baby, but we're no longer in the realms of I am a first-time father, and that's something that sometimes people forget, and you have to decide whether or not you correct people when they give you that celebratory card or pat on the back or whatever it is, to then say, well, actually no, there was Charlotte before this. In our context there was so it's with that in mind, that's where then remembering everything that went wrong, that's where the fears and the PTSD kick in.
Yeah, and it's not, like Simon said, it's not our first time being or even being a parent. We are parents, but it's not our first time trying, and the joy of it is taken. It almost becomes, having and making a baby is a beautiful thing, and now it's just a chore. Like, not, I don't know if chore or job's the right word, but it's all right, we have to get pregnant. And for some of us, or a lot of us, that in itself can be a challenge. So you have to deal with that of, we want to try, we're going to try, but can we get pregnant? Your body's been through trauma, pregnancy in general. One of our facilitators from Unite said to me when I joined his group, you'd be like, I'm more surprised that pregnancy is successful. Think about everything that has to align: getting pregnant, staying pregnant, having a safe delivery. Like, I'm shocked that the odds are, more successful than failure. So going through that, we were very successful the first time with Maya, but we struggled to get pregnant with Mila. We were days away from actually having a fertility meeting to try and figure out, like, was there issues or things like that, because our pregnancy was very healthy, and now we were struggling to get pregnant, and that just adds, again, more anxiety and a whole nother level to it. But prior to even trying, we knew that we were going to need support. And not that we were unhappy with our prior care team, but we needed a new team. They were not specializing in MFM, maternal fetal medicine. We wanted a high-risk doctor. I called in every favor I had. I went to my dad, who's a physician, and said, I need you to find the best MFM doctor in Philadelphia or the surrounding area. Like, we need to go to the best. And the same name kept popping up, and I called their office and they were not taking new patients, and I begged. I pulled the strings of, my dad's a doctor, can you just see us, just talk to us and give us guidance? And after meeting with that doctor, he agreed. And he was the one who diagnosed us as being simply incredibly unlucky. But he said, after reviewing your file, there's nothing medically that I can do for you, but I'm going to manage your anxiety and your mental, because that's what this, next 9 to 12 months is going to be, is not taking care of you mentally or physically, but taking care of you mentally. And that really was reassuring to us. And we were fortunate enough to have that person in our corner, and he put together our entire team with our regular OB and made sure that we had access to his practice and could come in when we needed. And, they really made us feel safe and comfortable, because second time around after a loss, we're going to advocate for ourselves and have extremely higher expectations and demands. And the key is that the team supports that and understands that and does not make us feel like we are a burden. And that's not always possible. And that's what we wanted lined up before we even tried to get pregnant. So before struggling, we had already put that team in place, as I didn't want to run around trying to do that now with my wife being pregnant and trying to find the right doctor.
I think having that anxiety management that you had, Matt, was one of the things that we were keen to ensure, that if we're making the decision to try again, then we need to have everything possible stacked in our favor, that everything that we could control, that we had an MFM that understood our position, that we had an OB that was helping us. We understood that people would say, well, now that this has taken place, you're naturally going to be put into a higher risk category. And having those assurances was one of the elements that was essential, and people not just assuming that, of course, we'd know that, but actually told us that was one of the key things towards the decision making of, do we try again? Do we go forward? Because not knowing is huge, particularly you're going back into the unknown. You don't know what happened, and could the same happen again? Because we can't change anything, because we don't know what went wrong. The only thing we do have, which we've covered in previous sessions, is that constant fear. What did we do wrong? Did we touch a chemical? Did we eat something we shouldn't have done? Did we eat something accidentally that we knew we shouldn't eat, but inadvertently we did we sit too close to somebody who was smoking? Did we go through those, and you go through that process, and you just end up going into a spiral of blaming yourself and just trying to cover all the bases and know it. So having had that unknown element, the thing that we were keen to do was to just make sure that we had everything stacked up that we could control in our favor. Matt, I was very impressed at the approach that you and Hallie took when you went through those processes. I felt April and I were fortunate in that when we went through the process, which was basically to say, do we think our OB is okay, and do we go with the same medical outfit, the medical team? Our answer was, well, we don't know of any reason why not, so let's just stick with what we've got, which led to a completely different outcome, in terms of going further down the line, because the other thing that we wanted in managing our anxiety was to have a plan. And that was one of the biggest things that I think, particularly, with an A-type personality, I like to have a plan anyway. But certainly in this instance, having a plan and knowing that somebody said, okay, this is going to happen then, we're going to see you every 2 weeks rather than every 4 weeks, which was the way that it was before. We're going to do this more often. You're going to have more of these tests, just to make sure that there's also nothing else that, we didn't spot during the process. of Charlotte, that this doesn't happen with the new baby. And that gave us some confidence. Our challenge, and having that self-advocating was completely alien to me, particularly with regards to the medical community. I come from the UK. The NHS system is a very good system, despite what you might hear elsewhere. But there was always that thing with people to say, our doctors are good. You don't question them because they know what they're doing. They're the experts. They tell you to bend over. When you say you've got an abscess in your mouth, you do whatever they tell you. And, in the belief that they know what they're doing and how to fix it. So moving to that point of doing more self-advocating was a little bit of a challenge, but it's something that I've got a lot more confidence in now, in challenging that authority and asking more questions. And so that, and having a plan, I think is something that gives great courage to people such as April and I, Matt and Hallie, to ensure that people have our backs and they know what's going on. And if there was anything that I would recommend, it would be having those conversations, not assuming that people know you've got their back, but telling them, having a plan and explaining all the steps as you go along. We didn't get that till week 30, 32. So for all the way up through that process, we ended up going to different MFMs, different doctors through the process. Having thought we already had our team, realized that nobody would actually give us a plan and say, no, we're just going to see how it goes, and you may go full term to week 40. And all this time we're thinking, we only got to 37 weeks, 2 days last time. We're trying to get to week 40, we could end up in the exact same boat. I want a doctor, April wanted a doctor that said to us we wouldn't go any further than 37 weeks. Even though the science, the guidance may say, it doesn't make any sense. We don't know what the problem is, so you should go all the way to the end. And our argument was, you don't know what the problem was. You don't know what the issue is. So maybe we should try and not go all the way to the end and end up at 37 weeks, 2 days, repeating that. And that was a huge thing for us in terms of the psychological, the mental state of mind that we had.
And everything was in your favor the first time around, and you became a statistic. So who wants to rely on statistics with the second pregnancy when things are still in your favor, but you've become a one of those people who live in that other downside of the statistics.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate in with the MFM that initially we were interviewing. I literally looked at it as I'm interviewing to be part of our team and lead it. And if it doesn't work, we'll keep searching. But what was nice for us was everything we wanted to ask or wanted to hear, he said before we even asked him. It was like he was reading our minds. And like Simon said, having someone give you that plan and explain how they're going to treat you, just explaining things was really assuring. And that would be from the educational standpoint of this. The more you can explain or outline or say why you're going to do something, or this is what's going to happen, or here's what we can do to help manage these things, that's just the assurance that we need. And then ultimately, understanding that we're going to be needier, we're going to have different expectations, we'll want to be seen, we'll want a direct line, we're going to have to be treated differently because we ultimately are different. And then from the other standpoint, knowing that when we come into doctors' offices or hospitals, it is PTSD and traumatic. So sitting in a waiting room with 40 other, pregnant women who are ecstatic and glowing, very challenging for us. Because we're watching the naivety and we are not naive. So, if special care or consideration can be given, it goes such a long way. And having, a good relationship is so important. I remember my wife being a little more timid, and our MFM said, advocate, advocate, advocate for yourself. I learned that from him. Tell them what you need, demand it, don't take less. And I call the regular OB and speak to I need this to happen, or, what's going on here? What's this result? And we weren't waiting for things. And one of the nurses was like, I'm actually really impressed how involved you are in like what you're doing to help your wife through this. And they became more helpful to us because they knew how much this meant and what was on the line for us. So providing that up front is huge.
Yeah, the anxiety knows no bounds. And I remember when April was going through, after the loss, April was going through the regular appointments that she would have to just check everything was okay, internally and what have you, before we even made the decision to have a baby. And going to those practices where she's going in to check that and have that checkup, and then going into a waiting room with so many pregnant women abound within it. It was something that we had to say, look, can we go and sit somewhere else? We can't stay here. We've just had a loss. And then I'd start to ring ahead at each of those appointments, because I'd go with April to them, and I'd ring ahead and just make sure, oh, by the way, can you just make sure we can come straight in and go to a room? The doctor may not be ready, but we just need somewhere that is not a waiting room. And thankfully they accommodated us. But it was back to the self-advocating and making sure that, if nothing else, keep April's sanity, keep on the right side of that, so that we can try and manage that as best as possible. She was always apprehensive about going because of that, and when it was that, or for meeting with the psychiatrist, the counsellor, I should say, to discuss, what we'd been through. There was always that element of trying to make sure that we were segregated. I think one of the questions that was raised for this session was, what did healthcare providers who worked with you do well? For us, initially, it was promising that next time will be better, and they did that really well. And then when it came to the execution, they didn't quite do it so well, and so we had to do more self-advocating on that front. But when we eventually found the right person, it made such a huge difference. It was such a huge weight off our shoulders. It was almost like, to a degree, oh, it's like the baby's been born now. We've gone through this process of trying to find somebody, and now we've actually found somebody who's listening. It helped so much.
We were deep in COVID when we were pregnant with Mila, so I didn't even get to go to any of the appointments. I watched a 20-week anatomy scan from FaceTime. So it was, challenging for Hallie. And we continued through therapy with, again, as we call her, Grammy Wismer now, but we met with Jerry regularly, and it was over Zoom at that point. And one of the things that Jerry helped us with was still managing our grief and, honoring Maya through this, while trying to stay positive. And the mantra that Jerry gave Hallie was, today I am pregnant and it is a good day. And that's what she had to say to herself every day. Today I am pregnant, nothing is wrong. And that's all she would try and do each day. And it's that juggle. Because now you're into it, once you do successfully get pregnant, staying pregnant and staying positive and not worrying that the worst is going to happen. My wife did kick counts multiple times a day. Our MFM made us a deal that we could have full access to his office and come in anytime we wanted, as long as we didn't buy a Doppler. Because he was terrified that we would use that and then not find the heartbeat and freak out, and as babies can hide and things like that. And he said, just to put your mind at ease, if by chance you have the Doppler on the baby's heartbeat and it's good 1 minute and the next it stops, you will not get to the hospital in time for us to save the baby. So do not put yourself through that emotional strain of trying to find it and then not finding it and finding it, and all day you would be using that. And I know there are other sides to that coin, and a lot of people have them. I don't know if Simon does or not, but Simon had 3 Dopplers. So but that was his thing. And we did, in the beginning of our pregnancy, go to the ER. It was a weekend, so we couldn't get into his office, but Hallie was feeling like muscle strain and she thought she was having an ectopic pregnancy, because that's where her mind went. And things were good, but everything was fine. The doctor's like, that's your uterus stretching, and like your muscles stretching as as your body gets ready to carry a baby. But we went immediately to the worst place. I haven't moved in a half an hour, and therefore my lights in my office turn off. So I'm back. But that's what we go through. And we had a scare in the ER because the doctor's like, we got an ER doctor, and nothing against them. But he was like, yeah, the heartbeat's a little fast at like 160, and he was telling us based off what a human's heartbeat should be and not a fetal. We called our friend who's a pediatric cardiologist at DuPont, and we're like freaking out. She's like, you're perfectly fine. He just doesn't know. Don't
normal.
But that's what we go through. I don't know if Simon and April ended up in an emergency room, for emergency checkups for fear of the worst when things were fine. But we go immediately 0 to 100 to the worst. If anything, Mila had a lot of hiccups. And we hear that's a great thing because they're learning how to breathe. We were freaking out, calling the doctor. And like, they'd be like, it's just hiccups, it's fine. We'd call back a week later, be like, she's still really hiccuping. And they'd be like, it's perfectly normal. And we'll be like, we'll call you next week with the hiccups. Like, they just knew but we were freaking out. As a living child, she gets the hiccups really easy now too. So
yeah, I think as part of our counseling, and not knowing what the future would hold, particularly during the pregnancy, one of the recommendations was to focus on what's different, from the previous pregnancy, just to try and keep us sane and think, okay, how is, rather than thinking how is, we're going through the same process. There's at no point where we say, oh, we lost our child at 8 weeks, so therefore once we get past 8 weeks, things will be a lot better. We were trying to get to the end, to the full term, 37 weeks, 2 days, and it sticks in my mind. The counsellor said, rather than focusing what is the same and worrying about what will happen when you get to that point, think about what's different now. Me being me took it to an extreme, where I was focusing on, I think about what's different from last time. but certainly from a more logical perspective, Charlotte, when we lost Charlotte, she was the easiest baby in the world. You know, she passed every test, everything was great. And Harper, going through her process, we felt like we hit every branch on the way down in terms of, in terms of problems. That, there'd be a test. Oh, we think that there's an indicator here, so we need you to come in and do another test. And we go in, and then we get the all clear. And then we got to the 20-week, process, and they say, oh well, there seems to be some kind of nodule on the back of her neck, and we've got to go through this, and we ended up doing a amniocentesis and the whole 9 yards. It was almost like somebody up there was saying, if we don't do something, we're going to drive you crazy with worrying, so let's give you these things, and which will drive you crazy with worrying, but you'll be focused on something else rather than what will happen come to the end. And it helped. The extreme part of it was that I said, well, last time when we were having Charlotte, the porch wasn't painted and I had a different car. Things that really don't tie into the whether or not things are going to turn out differently, but that was just how in my mind I overcame some of the stress of the anxiety and tried to manage that. But I think it's useful for people who are trying again, particularly where there's an unknown circumstance as to why the loss came about. It's good to tell them. I think what's different on this occasion from what went before, which is just an indicator then that things won't turn out the same. If nothing else, just to try and give that level of comfort.
I like that. And I know for us, the process of pregnancy, we didn't have any medical hiccups until the end, but we were definitely more detached. We did not want to bond with, the baby as much for fear that we would lose her. We didn't, you can find out via blood test what the sex is at like 8 weeks, and which we did that with Maya. With Mila, we didn't even know at the 20-week ultrasound, the anatomy scan. We waited till that came back in another test. So we didn't even find out we were having another girl till 23 or 26 weeks. And we told no one but our family. And it was something we weren't ready to deal with. Is there is what's called gender disappointment, which can happen with your first pregnancy, but it's very common in subsequent, because you're dealing with having a difference. So it's going to be a different experience, and you always expect to have a boy, and now you're having a girl, or vice versa. There's also the fear of the same, and so it's a double-edged sword. In our hearts, we both wanted to have a girl, because we had always planned, and at the end it really doesn't matter. Living is what matters. But we were scared to face that, and how our emotions would be. And Hallie, at that last ultrasound before we found out, thought she heard the text slip and say boy or something, and she gave us an envelope, and it turned out obviously to be a girl. But Hallie was freaking out the whole walk home, and like, we're having a boy, I really want a girl. Like, you just literally spiral. But we were detached, and I do think we became a little more excited and a little more attached when we did find out the sex. But we waited, and we told our parents in the beginning, like as soon as we peed on the stick, we cried. But it was happy tears and sad tears, whereas the first time it was purely happy. But we called our parents and literally were like, we're pregnant, just prepare for us to be nuts. Whereas the first time around, we used funny ways to tell our parents that we were having kids, or a kid. And this time around, it was just matter of fact business, which was the word I was looking for. Like, getting pregnant was business. Being pregnant was business. It wasn't an enjoyable experience. And I tried at the end, towards the end, like to have that connection, because I felt bad, like I was, not bonding with my second daughter, but I didn't know what was going to happen, and I knew I couldn't mentally deal with that loss again. So there was definitely that sort of distance that we kept, and
we had the same, Matt, and for a period of time we tried to employ that detachment, not having a name selected, trying not to do too much planning in advance, to try and not get too attached, until we got to the point where we thought, if we suffer another loss, will we regret this? We're not having not done that bonding. Will we regret it and then wish that we had, just so that what small token links that we have to this baby, that if we do end up suffering the same again, that we'll think, oh, we wish we did this. So because we tried to avoid, we avoided doing the baby announcement, the gender reveal. We didn't do any of that. But at some point, we flipped a little and said, okay, we're not going to select a name just because we'd selected it so early last time, but we'll try and do as much as we possibly can within ourselves to just make sure that, what we can enjoy when we can enjoy it, we try and do that. But that got to, that didn't happen until some ways through the pregnancy, when we'd had that discussion.
Yeah, I remember, when we found out, and I had the same thoughts as you just, expressed, Simon, the regret of not bonding and not having some excitement. And, as Jerry said, today you're pregnant and everything's great. I started to change, and I remember driving. I had to get my phone or a phone fixed, and I had to drive down like an hour and 20 minutes down 95, and I spent the whole ride just saying Mila's name in my head, that's what I wanted to name her, knowing I had a fight with my wife ahead of me because I didn't think I was going to win that. But, I just kept saying the name and being excited, and thinking about it. And again, we tried, but it's still so hard. And as the saying goes, we all make a plan and then God laughs at us. So at 35 and change, 36 weeks, we were at my parents' house, moving some furniture, and Hallie went to the bathroom because she felt something and screamed, and she was bleeding. She had turned out luckily to be a very small, but a placental abruption. And we're at my parents' house, they're not there. And we freaked out, put her in the car and ran two red lights, speeding to the local hospital that I happened to be born at, not knowing that it became a community hospital and has no neonatal or OB, and it's just community emergency room and like surgery center. And they were ill-equipped. They had a Doppler, but they didn't have an ultrasound. They didn't have a Toco machine. So they're, finding the baby's heartbeat and things are good, but we're freaking out thinking that the baby's going to die due to this abruption, and they don't have a staff. And they're talking about transferring us, and we're freaking out. We ended up being transferred to Abington, which was closer. But we were supposed to deliver at Pensy at 8th and Spruce, I think it is. And we ended up at Abington and Jenkintown, because that was the closer of the two hospitals, and the ambulance was 50 minutes delayed to getting to the hospital to transfer us. I was screaming, to put us on the helicopter and get us there because they didn't have the equipment. And we spent 12 total days, I think it was, but leading up the whole week at Abington in the mom unit, which is a high risk unit where they watch moms which ended up being a blessing because we spent our last week in the hospital with the best care of, every machine and doctors looking over us, and we weren't at home freaking out, as we had always planned to have a induction at 37 weeks. But again, at Pensy. So we had a whole birthing plan and, how we were going to deal with it. And turns out we threw that right out the window because we now had a brand new team, a whole new doctor, a whole new hospital. Funny enough, we did a 3-car jockey because my wife's car had the chair in it because we didn't even unload the furniture. So someone had to bring us clothing again. My car, which had the car seat in it, my parents had to bring a car to bring us clothing. Like, the valet thought we were hysterical as we just circled, but a little humor to the scariest, the second worst part of trying to have a baby. But we spent, the week there with, again, a whole new team who, again, was very supportive. And they understood and they took great care of us as we were very vocal about, where we were. And the doctor said, if you hadn't had your loss, we would have sent you home, and told you to come back in 37 weeks since the bleeding stopped. But we spent that week and change and then had the induction. But, to go through that again, to think you've gotten to the finish line again and be losing it again,
Yeah.
we were right back into it.
Yeah,
Can I go back? Go ahead,
Go on, Kathy.
Simon, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I want to go back to the bonding piece. So our hearts and our brains try to protect us, right? And it might sound horrible to somebody who doesn't know about loss and what it can do to your mind and to your heart to say, oh, well, I didn't really bond with the baby. But you're trying to protect yourself. So it's understandable. And newsflash, if it had happened again, you would have grieved that baby's loss just like you did Maya and Harper's. That delayed bonding wouldn't have affected your reaction if that had happened. The other thing I want to just go back to is the Doppler. I've never understood why some medical equipment is available for purchase to use at home. And that's what a Doppler is. And I can tell you that, as a nurse with 35 years of listening to fetal heartbeats, there are times when I couldn't find the heartbeat with a big, fetal monitor, much less a little tiny Doppler, because the baby, like Matt, you said, is, turned the wrong way, or you can't get to the baby's back, or, a whole host of reasons.
I completely understand that, Kathy, and understand the advice not to do it just because of the false fear that it may engender. I know with ourselves that we tried to make sure that we were sensible with respect to that.
Right. That's good. That's good.
And that we remembered that we may not find it, and it may not be because it's not there. It's just,
right.
Again, like you say, it's a microscope. Yeah. We were fortunate in that a lot of times we were able to find it. On the occasions that we couldn't find it, we then kind of, that's probably a psychological description, name for this, but we then thought, oh, the equipment's faulty, so we bought another. That's why we ended up with 3. We probably ended up with 5 in all told, with people lending us equipment and oh, this one's better, try this one, and and it's all psychological. The thing that we just had to make sure we bore in mind was, like you say, that positionally it may be against us, it may be there, not to go absolutely crazy, but it was one of those aspects that in a world where you have no control, you know, it was the one thing that we could maybe do.
Yeah, no, I understand. And
Yeah.
please, I'm not trying to invalidate your experience at all.
No.
Just, again, I'm looking at it from the other side, not having experienced what you both experienced.
Right. And
It's a huge debate in our community.
yes.
It's a giant debate in our community. But yeah.
I want to ask you both one question. We're near the end. And I've heard this from a lot of mothers, but is the thought always in the back of your mind? I wonder what Maya would be doing. I wonder what Charlotte would be doing now. When you see children at the age that Maya and Charlotte would be now, does that come to your mind? And can you talk about that if it does?
We could take the next 3 hours probably to talk about that, but I'll keep it short, especially to make sure I save some time for Simon. But yeah, the challenge that we face as lost parents at this point, at least for us being 4 years out, is what we refer to as the secondary losses. It's the what ifs, what would have been, what should have been, what could have been, all of what you just said. So yeah, we wonder what she would look like. Would she be funny? Would she be serious? Would she like to dance? Like all of those things. And then you do watch the world or your friends, Maya should be in kindergarten this year. I know for Hallie, buying Mila her backpack was really troubling, because she was supposed to buy that backpack for Maya. And do you get the one that you loved, or a different one because you want to separate the kids? But all of that. So it's a huge challenge on our journey, and it's something that we'll always have to struggle with, because there's always something that should have been. Like I said, I used the daddy-daughter dance. I got to have it, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be. And that's where people also think that the new baby will replace, because I'll get that daddy-daughter dance. It's not the same daddy-daughter dance. And don't get me wrong, I will love every minute of it with Mila, but it's just not. It's not the same.
Same but different.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Matt hit the nail on the head, particularly for me anyway. It's the secondary losses. When you have the loss, for your wife, it's a loss of something more substantive, because the baby has grown, developed within them. They've already got those links, so they've already had those experiences, and so that loss becomes intrinsically different from the father, in terms of not having that experience. But for us as fathers, it's the anticipation, it's what's going to come that you lose. And it becomes one of those instances whereby every holiday, particularly children-centric holidays, whether it's Halloween, Christmas, Father's Day, Mother's Day, it's those days where you're reminded of that loss and what could have been. And it's as Matt described very articulately at the beginning of this session, you hold in one hand the grief of the loss that you've experienced, and in the other hand the happiness and the hope that you have for that child that you do have. And it's trying to, every holiday, every circumstance, it's trying to balance those, so that you have a good mental attitude towards it. What could have been against what is happening. So Charlotte, every year we put up a web outside our house, with a giant spider on it, and that's Charlotte's Web. And that's, you know, our commemoration, our reminder, a fun way of doing it, and at the same time having that ability then to enjoy those moments with our living daughter.
It becomes not a challenge, but there are challenges to it, but it becomes a blessing in some ways to intertwine the two,
Yeah.
and tell your living child about their older sister. We take Mila to the cemetery, and she knows that Maya's there, and we have a bear through oh god, now that I've Molly Bears, if you're familiar with the organization, that weighs exactly what, you know, Maya weighs, and is dressed in the way we explained, like with butterflies and colors and purples and a tutu, and you know, she knows that's Maya Bear. Like you know, they have Charlie, Simon, and April, and you know, there's just ways that you incorporate them into your day-to-day and your holidays, but it's a challenge every day to make sure that you honor both of your children, or if you have more, all of them, as it is part of our family and who we are.
I think if I may be permitted to just say one last thing, we didn't select a name for Harper until, you know, a day or so into after she was born, because we decided not to make that decision.
Me and you.
And we also said that, you know, we'd like to include somebody's name on there, so we April's older daughter had the middle name Elizabeth, so we said, okay, let's have Charlotte Elizabeth. And all through the time during the pregnancy of Harper, there was, you know, constantly trying to remember or think of things that were different, to say this is why it's going to turn out differently. I'd made a little sign, and that sign, if you can read it, I don't know if it says hope. The Charlotte Elizabeth that's at the top I added later on, but all the way through I had this pinned up next to my monitor, you know, hope, because it's the strongest thing. Hopefully hope overcomes hatred and all the other negative things in the world, but hope constantly was in my mind that we could change things. And eventually we named Harper Elizabeth Hope, and that was the ultimate blessing for me, and something that, you know, will be constant reminder of how blessed we are that we have her.
I think that's a perfect way to end, and I'm so emotional. And we're so grateful that you let us see into your hearts during the 6 hours that you spent with all of us. So I'm gonna go be a blubbering idiot off camera.
And thank you again, Kathy, for and everybody for this opportunity to share this process with you, go through the challenges, the ups and the downs. It's something that, you know, fills our hearts as well with this opportunity. So thank you.